Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my talk. So today, I'm going to introduce a new DNS attack. Hopefully, this is entertaining to all of you guys. So a little bit of our team. I'm currently an assistant professor at UC Irvine, and then I do a lot of research in cybersecurity, major focusing on DNS, graph security analytics, and some machine learning stuffs. The team also have two other PhD students, and one coming from Tsinghua University in China, Xiang. So he's a hardcore DNS guy. He did work visiting my lab at UC Irvine, and Qifan Zhang is my PhD student. Okay, so firstly, I want to give like a one-liner to introduce the impact of our attack. So basically, our DNS attack is able to poison the entire top-level domain, TLD. For example, .com, just with one round of communications. So what that means is like if you're visiting google.com, you choose some DNS resolvers, and if I'm attacking that resolvers, your traffic to google.com will be hijacked. So we think this is pretty a big deal. Okay, so this is the outline of my talk. I'm going to cover those things. Firstly, I want to give a brief introduction for the DNS infrastructure, and then I'm going to talk about the basics of DNS cache poisoning, which our attack is built upon. And then I'm going to show maybe just one demo of our attack. And after that, I want to present our large-scale measurement study to identify the vulnerable populations in the wild. And finally, I want to discuss a few mitigations and our conversations with vendors and conclude my talk. Okay, so let's get started. So firstly, DNS is short for domain name system. And I believe nowadays, if you use internet, you cannot avoid actually get in touch with DNS. No matter if you're doing browsing, doing email conversations, doing messengers, usually you will need to use those user-friendly domain names, and then the DNS is going to translate those domain names into numerical IP addresses. None of us are good at least me, are good at remembering numbers, so domain names are usually really helpful. So it has become the entry point of many DNS internet activities, and then if we look at the numbers of registered domains, it's been huge. So nowadays we have more than 300 million domain names has been registered according to the number of 2022. So this talk, we're going to focus on the resolution procedure of DNS. At a high level, most of the time, DNS goes through UDP. A certain ratio of DNS goes through TCP, but the ratio is not too much. It can do the iterative resolution or recursive resolution. So here I'm going to just do like this textbook level, style introduction of DNS infrastructure, but in reality it's much more complicated. So usually we have some DNS clients making DNS queries about the domain name at the one end, and at the other end we have the namespaces, hierarchical namespaces broken into root level, TLD level, like .com, .net, and SLD level, like example.com, google.com. Okay, so if you want to resolve a domain name, you usually send out DNS query from the clients, goes through the forwarders, which usually passes your queries to the recursive resolvers, and the forwarders are usually on the routers, IoT devices. Recursive resolvers can be ISP, can be public, like Google DNS. So then they're going to do the iterative processing, talking to different levels like root, TLD, SLD, getting those answers back. In the end, if you're asking about the IP address of example.com, after 3 layers of hierarchical resolution, you should get your results to your clients. And your results will be cached in the recursive resolver and sometimes in the forwarder. So next time someone asking the same questions, their time can be saved. Okay, so as far as we know, the resolvers has become the central piece for all kinds of attacks against the DNS infrastructure. The primary goal of the DNS attack, in particular cache poisoning, is to inject malicious answers into the resolver cache. So there has been lots of development in this area, starting from 1997. We saw the first DNS attack, and then after more than 20 years, there are still new attacks coming in. Especially what I saw in the academia field, like in the recent 3 years, quite a few new attacks coming out and catch a lot of attention. And then we do see really powerful DNS attacks in the wild, actually targeting the whole country. And according to certain surveys and security vendors, studies, lots of organizations has been hit by DNS attacks. And then the IoT devices, some of them are impacted by these DNS bugs in the millions of the population. So this is really, really a big deal. So I'm just going to go through two basic versions of DNS attacks, cache poisoning attacks. So in 1997, we have this cache-proof DNS attack. This is Unpass attack. So the idea of attack is to let the attackers control multiple parties, essentially the clients, authoritative name servers, and some other servers, so they can give malicious queries and responses. And we have these vulnerable ISP resolvers sitting in the corner. So it starts with these malicious clients to query a domain of the attacker. For example, this alternic.net, this is attacker's domain. So ISP resolvers saw that, and then they're going to query the authoritative servers in a hierarchical fashion. And so because alternate.net was controlled by the attacker, so attacker can see the forwarded queries. Okay, so because it's the attacker, they don't need to necessarily respond with information only about this particular domain. So in the end, people found they can also give information about any other domains all the time. Okay, so in this example, the attackers say, I know the name server for this internic.net, and this is the legitimate domain. Okay, so and then this information is going to be cached by the resolver, but this is forged information. So next time, if there are some clients wants to query for the IP address of this internet.net, it's actually going to go to attacker's name servers, and then the attacker can reply with some malicious IP addresses. So after that, phishing attacks, spam attacks can happen because then user traffic is going to the malicious server. So this is Unpass attack because the attacker controls the authoritative server. The way we deal with this old attack is called bailiwick checking. So the high-level idea here is really simple. We don't let the attacker or like those authoritative servers to answer anything. So the things they can answer and can be accepted should be below their zone, below their range. As an example here, say if you're, as an attacker, you control this example.com domain, and the clients query this domain name. So you can give lots of answers. If you're an attacker, you can give the IP address, you can give the name servers, you can give many other things. But if you run the bailiwick checking rule, so for those three records, the example.com can be accepted because this example.com in the answer section falls under the zone of example.com. This is OK. It's called in bailiwick. And if the authoritative server is trying to answer the question regarding the mybank.com and some other domains, this is called out of bailiwick because those answers have nothing to do with example.com, and it's going to be rejected by the recursive resolver. Okay, so I mean, the community think after the bailiwick checking, this powerful attack can be defended against because, I mean, then if attacker is Unpass, there's not much they can do. So people think it may be impossible to do that. And after that, in 2008, we have this really famous and powerful Unpass DNS attack called the DanKaminski Attack, and proposed by DanKaminski. So the idea here is say, okay, this time if we cannot control the authoritative server, can we still, forge the DNS resolution records? We actually have one less party to control, to play with. It's still possible through network layer attacks. So here, say if the attacker control malicious clients making a query to a subdomain of mybank.com. Mybank.com was legitimate. So the resolver is going to forward this query to the authoritative server of mybank.com. Okay? And then in this request, there will be a non-random number being attached called TXID. It's random number, so every time it should be different. The attacker cannot control mybank.com's authoritative server, but the attacker can raise against the responses coming from this server using the same domain name in the response, and also try to hit the same TXID. So how can an attacker do that? Actually, brute forcing is good enough. The reason is, in old time, TXID is only 16 bits. So brute forcing this number is not really a big deal, computational perspective. So if an attacker is successful in guessing the right TXID number, and the response come earlier than the authoritative one from mybank.com that can be accepted by the recursive resolver. Okay, so the attack will be successful. If that's not the case, the attacker can run another round of attack using different subdomains and then redo everything over again. So the fundamental problem of this attack, the reason why this attack can happen is only TXID is randomized. Source port at all time is not randomized. So then, of course, the way we should mitigate the Kaminski attack is to randomize the source port. The source port has 16 bits. So if we add those 16 bits source port to the 16 bits TXID, we have 32 bits entropy space, and it makes the attacker hard to find the right combinations. So we actually figure out, okay, this is really powerful defense solutions against the Kaminski attack. And people think it's difficult to do a pass attack after 2008. So in this work, we challenge this perception, and we ask this question, is bailiwick checking and the port randomization good enough as a defense solution for DNS? And of course, the answer is no, because I'm presenting an attack talk. Okay, so here I'm going to first overview the high-level idea of our attack called MaginotDNS, and then I'm going to walk through the actual workflow. So in this attack, we target a subset of DNS resolvers called CDNS, and I'm going to explain later. And we are able to break the bailiwick checking, and so we call this really powerful attack. But because this is so powerful, so then I want to put this ahead. It's not effective against every resolver, so only a subset of resolver is vulnerable. Usually you have powerful attack, it's not usually universally effective. That's my experiences. But still, we found lots of resolvers are vulnerable. Okay, so we call our attack as MaginotDNS because we draw some inspiration from the marginal line in the World War II France. And then we found there are some fuzzy boundaries between different modes of DNS. So first, I want to introduce the CDNS resolver. You may not be really familiar with that. It's relatively new in terms of the deployment. So this is short for the conditional DNS resolver. It supports both recursive modes and forwarding modes, and they can run in the same time. Usually, we see a resolver either be a recursive resolver or forwarder, but a CDNS do the two things at the same time. So this is kind of unique. And also, the cache is shared. So actually, how can we turn a DNS resolver into a CDNS? You can actually just make some changes to the zone query zone configuration file. You actually, if you do the bind9, there is I believe it's some named .conf configuration file. There's a section regarding the query zone, and then you can specify certain domains to be resolved under the forwarding mode, and the rest of the domains under recursive modes. So just some simple configuration. And then we found this thing being used in the wild, and then we try to figure out why people use this CDNS. What's our motivation? So we interviewed a few parties, enterprises, and ISPs, and in the end, we found most of the time they try to manage network traffic. Some of them tries to reduce the traffic cost. For example, in enterprise, you have internal networks, and then you have some enterprise clients making DNS queries. If you set up a CDNS, you are able to actually direct the queries to the internal domains, to a local resolver through the recursive resolution procedure, and all the other domains to the public DNS, like Google's DNS. So with that, the heavy load of recursive resolution can be saved by a public resolver, but your internal DNS resolutions have better control. Okay. So in this attack, we assume an attacker targets CDNS, and they have already inferred the domains falling in those two parts. And the attacker targets the forwarding modes. So why? I mean, why the attacker not targeting the other modes? We have done some study ahead of time, and we also saw lots of papers in the security conferences showing the forwarding mode is usually weaker than the recursive mode. And some of the mechanisms are not really deployed on the forwarders, and they also share the same cache. So then we are trying to see, can we break the weaker mode of the CDNS and then impact the stronger modes? Essentially breaking the boundary. And then, so we start with the software analysis. We go through, we have done code review of 8 mainstream DNS software, including BIND, Microsoft DNS. We go through source code. We look at their debugging information, testing, and then we try to draw their code logic regarding bailiwick checking. And even though bailiwick checking should be a simple logic, but we are really surprised to see their their control flow logic are really diverse. I know this figure has really small font, but I want to point out their logic are very diverse in different software. So there are lots of inconsistency in just this simple piece of code logic. And we try to summarize their common behaviors, and then so we draw this pseudocode. We found that there is a really interesting design decision by those software when they're running the forwarder mode, in that when they try to set the query zone for DNS query, they use the root rather than the exact domain they query for the bailiwick checking. And actually, root is very, very broad. Any domain can fall under the root. So that creates a problem, and I'm going to dive into details later. So among 8 software, we found 4 of them are vulnerable. They all support forwarding mode, recursive mode, and we can attack all of them. Okay. So firstly, for the details of our attack, firstly, I want to go through different versions of bailiwick checking, the right versions and the wrong version. So for the right version, here is what should happen, especially on a recursive resolver. You have some clients talking to a name server, goes to recursive resolver. So if the client is asking about domain example.com, in this first pass, the query zone, which is actually a session variable of a recursive resolver, will be set to the same domain to be queried by the clients. And then recursive resolver further reach out to the name servers to get the answers of this domain name. And then so the answers can have many different variations. If the records are under example.com, and that can be accepted according to the bailiwick checking because these answers matches with the query zone. But if the name servers give something else, like google.com, whitehouse.gov, those domain name records, they're going to be rejected because they are not matching against the example.com. So we have the bailiwick checking rule done right. And then if we look at CDNS, and we see some their unique properties that actually break bailiwick checking. So this time we assume the 2 zones has been set up. The forwarding zone has example.com, and any other domains outside of the forwarding zone are in the recursive zone. Okay, so the client's asking the same question to the CDNS in the forwarding zone. And then this time, because of implementations of the forwarders, the query zone is set to the root. So this is a big problem because when the upstream servers are controlled by the attacker, so they can reply things regarding the example.com, and they can reply the things regarding the google.com and the whitehouse.com, and every records will be accepted by the recursive by the CDNS because they will fall under the query zone of the root. So root is very broad. And this is really not a big problem if the forwarding cache and recursive cache are split, but in the end, every resolver we surveyed, they have the shared cache. So then the recursive cache will be poisoned. So next time, if there's another client making a query about google.com, it's going to be hacked. So we saw this problem. And based on that, we developed 2 versions for our MaginotDNS attack on this high-level idea. So we have an Unpass version. So in this example, we have the client as an attacker, and then we have the attacker controls authoritative server. And then the domains queried by the attacker falls within the forwarding zone, like attacker.com. And then the CDNS is just going to send this domain directly to the attacker, so authoritative server, because it's in the forwarding mode. And if we already know that forwarding mode is more vulnerable, bailiwick checking is weak. So the attacker can just reply with these records about .com name server. And please pay attention to this record. It's not about any second level. It's about .com. And it overrides the entire name server, parts of the .com. So after that, any domain under .com you want to query, and if the resolver tries to find name server, it's going to come to me as an attacker, and I can just give whatever arbitrary thing I want to give. So it will be really, really bad for any recursive resolver, and it's just like any CDNS, and it's just one round of communication. Okay, and we found those 4 software are vulnerable. And in other cases, we found sometimes the attacker cannot directly be on the path between the CDNS and the authoritative servers, and is not directly in the forwarding mode. It may receive some queries in the recursive modes. So we still found it's possible to break CDNS. So in this case, if the attacker sees recursive queries about attacker.com, and the attacker cannot directly break in bailiwick checking, so what the attacker can do is to let the attackers to run the Unpass DNS cache poisoning, keep trying different TXID and port numbers, and then when the attacker's records request a match with those numbers, and then they can still overwrite the .com name server parts records and then poisoning the whole zone. And we found Microsoft DNS and the BIND was vulnerable under these techniques. So here I want to go into details of those 2 of past DNS attacks. Firstly on BIND and second is on Microsoft DNS. Okay, so for the BIND, we actually use the existing attack techniques called CDNS, and that was proposed in 2020 ACM/CCS, and later they have a new version in I believe 2021 or 2022. Okay, so the idea of CDNS, and this is a really clever attack. So the CDNS is used to guess the source port. They found ICMP can be used as side channel to learn which port actually opening. So what happens is the attacker can send 50 UDP probes to the resolver, and then in one round, and then the resolver will just reply to you about whether one of those ports is open or not. Of those 50 ports, also in one round. So in the end, we can reduce the searching time by the factor of 50. And because one round, you get the status of 50 ports. And this is a nice thing of the CDNS. So we combine the CDNS guessing together with TXID brute forcing, and then with our attack payloads, and then we have done some theoretical analysis. We show after 3,600 rounds, we are able to break the BIND with really high success rate. And another software we found are vulnerable under the MaginotDNS of pass mode is Microsoft. We found it's really interesting how Microsoft DNS do the port randomization. So instead of using the 16 bits as entropy, it's only used 2,500 source ports for randomization. We are not sure about why, but this is just how they do it. But we cannot directly run the CDNS because all the ports are opened. But in the end, it's not a really large range, so we just brute forcing those 2,500 ports, combining with TXID, we're able to succeed in 720 rounds. Okay, so I believe I can show one demo and then come to the end of my talk. So here we have done some analysis in our lab environments. We set up the resolver, clients, authoritative servers. No real-world parties was harmed in this procedure. We found after like around 800 seconds, we can successfully poison one CDNS. So let me run my demo. It's on YouTube, no sound, so hopefully it's working. So let me do the full screen modes, and then, yeah, quality should be good. So here, what we show first is the versions of the software we attacked, which is a BIND 9, and the actual version is BIND 16. Nowadays, I think the latest version is maybe 18 or 20. And then we also show the version of our operating system, Ubuntu. And then firstly, before the attacks, we ran the queries regarding github.com. So everything was correct. Their IP address was right. And then after that, we also show the name servers of the .com. So here, everything was right. This is the correct instrumentation regarding the .com name servers. So it should be handled by those parties. Okay. And then we run our attacks using these shell scripts. So what happens is it runs CDNS, keep probing the ICMP, And then also trying different TXID. So this whole thing is going to run like quite some time. So I just jump to the end of the attack. So in the end, we show after this number of seconds, we're able to overwrite the name server part of the .com. So basically, and this is the end of the attack. Okay. So after that, we actually query the .com name server again, and it's actually hijacked. This time, the answer section of the .com points into our domain, ns.attack, and the IP address is nothing relevant to the ICANN's IP addresses. So we are completely hijacked this zone. Okay, and we have the slides published, so I believe you can go back. If you are interested, you can check our demos after that for more details. Okay, so we also have done some large-scale analysis to understand how the populations of those domains that are vulnerable under our attacks. So the scanning part is a little bit tricky because usually they do not directly tell they are CDNS or not. But we found if they run the forwarder and the recursive resolver, they have different options in whether they want to cache the name server parts. So in the end, we run 2 queries regarding the domains and their name servers and see whether they are cached, and then we infer whether this is a CDNS. So we identify 1.2 open resolvers. We found like 154,000 running CDNS, and then we found within them 1/3 of them are vulnerable. Okay, so even though this is really not a super large ratio, but the absolute number is still high, and we think this something should be protected against. So we report our findings to the 4 vendors. We got 4 CVEs, and then when we look back at why this thing happened, why they make this design decision in such a flexible forwarding bailiwick checking rule in the forwarder modes, and we are not really sure why. Or we feel maybe this is the party controlling the forwarders want to make sure they have more play with the records returned in the resolution, but we think this is not good for security. So we propose a few solutions, and they have all been adopted. Okay, so this is the last part of my talk. 3 sentences regarding my talk to summarize. Firstly, even though bailiwick checking has been there for 26 years, we found it's not bulletproof. And we found it's really amazing how different parties implement this part in an inconsistent way. For the resolvers have different, recursive resolver modes are different. BIND, Microsoft implement things different. And we also feel the RFC a little bit vague regarding what's the right way to implement bailiwick checking. So that left the vendors a little bit confused. And this is also based on our conversations with the vendors. And in the end, last year and the year ahead, previous years, our group identified quite a few DNS bugs. We have quite a few papers. But we still feel this may just be a tip of iceberg. And I feel we do really need automated tools like fuzzers. And my group is working on that. So finally, that's my favorite meme. And I just want to call you guys' attention to DNS. It's relevant to so many issues. Nowadays, as a community, we should work harder to make sure DNS is secured. That's all. Thank you.